Hey there, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Business Behind Fundraising podcast. I'm so glad you're tuning in today's episode to hear from my colleague and client, Turow-Paul, who is a food culture expert. There's going to be no doubt when you listen to this today. She is the founder of Food for Climate League. And so I met Eve through another client of mine. And, it's funny. I work with organizations all over the country. That's fun for me. And when she reached out, I said, yeah, I can meet with you, but where are you? Thinking it could be on Zoom. And she's literally like 6 blocks from my house. So we got to actually meet in human to human and have coffee and we hit it off. I had 1 foot on a plane on vacation. But I knew I had to work with her because I love working with leaders that I learned from. I learned from a mission standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, and just learning from experts. And so you're going to hear that today. If you're listening to this and you're running an organization that is really focused on kind of rolling out projects, there's work to be had, and you're getting contracts for that. You're getting funding for very project-based funding. This is for you. Eve has successfully shifted a lot of her funding into significant general operating gifts, and that's the name of the game. And as she's grown her organization and scales it by millions, she's been able to secure larger and larger general operating gifts. And so I want you to be inspired by her, hear her story, and hear how she's done it. So thanks for tuning in. Eve, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was excited to have you tell your story today because as maybe you know or not, but my listeners know that one of my favorite things about my job is actually working with incredible leaders, and you are right there on the top of the list. And so I would love for you to start with just the origination story of your organization, because it is come in hard and fast, and it has been a rocket ship, ever since launching. So If you could just start with your origination story, and then please weave your just interesting background and expertise into that. We'll start there.
Food for Climate League is an organization that, to be frank, I never set out to found or run, but here I am 5 years in. And it is a growing organization, and I'm so proud of what it has become. My background is as an author and quote unquote thought leader, and I had been making my living for quite some time working as a consultant for large food companies, hospitality companies, farming organizations. I've written 2 books on global food culture, and I'm particularly interested in the emotional underpinnings that drive people's decision-making when it comes to their food choices. So why is it that young people today are spending a disproportionate amount of their discretionary time and income on food? And in my 10, 15 years of research on that subject, I had gotten a deep knowledge of the rising rates of anxiety and stress and loneliness that people are coping with today, and that people are using food as a coping mechanism, right, as a tool in their toolbox to help them feel more in control, more connected, more purposeful. And I was spending my time consulting for organizations on this. And I was invited to come into a conference and present on Gen Z and food trends. And I think I talked actually mostly about the climate crisis and depression because I had just come back from a whirlwind trip around the world doing research for my second book, Hungry. And I was able to see that many of the reasons why young people have been spending so much of their extra time and money on food is because they're not spending it on cars, houses. They're not intending to have children. And underlying a lot of that was this feeling of, why bother? I don't know if my city's going to be underwater in 50 years. I don't know if I want to bring a child into this world. And it really is the YOLO lifestyle. You only live once, that's been created by this generation. And I got off stage at this conference, and there are several people from large food companies who said to me, I think young people are full of it when it comes to sustainability. And we know this because our food products never sell well, or our sustainability campaigns never resonate. And I just happened, and this is how life works, I just happened to go to a coffee break and run into two incredible women.
Wow.
Dorothy Shaver, who is the head of sustainability for food at Unilever. She's based out of the Netherlands. And Lisa Feldman, who heads up menu impact strategy now for Sodexo North America. Two women who collectively, impact what billions of people eat every day. And we just got into an interesting conversation, and I actually had never talked to either of them before.
Wow.
And we started to talk about the fact that, even within the food space, there is a lot of miscommunication around sustainability. There are a lot of negative biases about sustainable food systems. Mm-hmm. And how the heck can we expect the everyday person to make a sustainable food choice when even people within the food system who work on this aren't always making the sustainable food choice or don't understand why they should be? And we presented this idea to an executive at Google. And to be frank, we thought we were asking for advice on who to go to for funding. And I was extraordinarily pregnant. I still clearly remember this phone call. I was sitting on a pregnancy ball, bouncing up and down.
Oh my gosh.
Panting because I had no room left for my lungs. And he just said, I'm going to give you some initial funding. And I think you should form a 501c3 and get back to me in 4 months with a comprehensive report on the global narrative on the intersection of food and climate. And let's see if there's something here.
Incredible.
And I went into labor 3 weeks later, and my book manuscript was due 4 weeks after that. And we did turn that report in.
Oh my gosh. And you had a business or another business.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so it all kind of worked out, and there's all sorts of things in life that feel serendipitous, but also maybe this was kind of it seems like it was the right path, and I don't know how he knew, but he did. He planted the seed and provided the funding, and we were off to the races.
Off to the races. It's what has been so interesting, just as we work together. And you're describing how people respond to food or the emotion behind it or the behavior behind it. Mm-hmm. I think in every conversation, I'm like, oh, I think I do that. I mean, it really is the normal everyday person that's on autopilot that
it's all of us.
It's all of us. It's just provided that aha moment for me a number of times. Eve, I think what I also love about your amazing team is this is a rock star, trailblazing, women-led group of women. I mean, I even hopped on the website and was like, oh my gosh, you're killing it. Talk to me about how you've just attracted, formed, there's this women-led group that is just so inspiring to so many.
It's a great question. And I want to be clear, we haven't intentionally made it a women-led organization. Well, I shouldn't say that. From the beginning, it was. Now that we're growing, it's not as intentional. Yes. From the start, the kind of next step for us was actually to reach out to additional colleagues and say, okay, we got this, project underway. And even before we had the funding, we did this outreach and brought in Sarah Reversi from Future Food Institute and Amy Cull from Marin Restorative. And it just happened to be women, honestly, who responded to the kind of ask that we had around changing the narrative of sustainable food systems to engage the masses. And as we've grown, we have maintained a virtual team. And in many ways, that's difficult. It's really difficult to grow a team and create this sense of collective action and power together in a virtual setting. At the same time, it has allowed us to really select people who have this niche expertise and who are extraordinarily passionate. And I got to tell you, every time the team comes together, it's like it's old friends hanging out. Oh. There's so much laughter and joy. I just wish we got to do it more often. And now it just happens to be mostly women who apply to the jobs in this space. And I've heard this as well from other folks working in sustainability. But in many ways, especially kind of the original group, and I can't leave out Chiara Cecchini and Chavi Jatwani, but it became a sisterhood. Yeah. And I think that actually was particularly important to the growth of the organization during COVID. So we got the funding halfway through 2019, but then we were just starting to ramp up. And I honestly, I remember we went back to that original funder in early March to ask for another round of funding. And he was the first person to tell me, about COVID and that this was going to shut
Really?
everything down. I mean, I had heard about it, but he was the
Of
first
course.
business leader who was like, no, 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 there's no funding. Like, I can't fund anything right now. I remember at the time he was like, just wait till October. But anyway, it was,
Yeah. Or we
I
all
don't
thought
know
we'd
why
wait
he
5
chose
weeks.
October, but yeah.
Yeah, it was
Right. He
early
was
in
the first
March.
person to basically be like, yeah, he was, anyhow, but it actually created a sisterhood, an emotional support
Mm,
system for us during that really difficult period. And everyone was experiencing losses and, personal
yeah,
tragedies during that period of time. And
right.
somehow we held each other up and we were able to continue growing this organization.
Yeah. And you're stronger because of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay, so here we are running an organization through COVID, new baby, new book, all the things.
Yeah.
Um, so and I remember when you reached out to me because I had one foot on a plane on vacation, but we live very close to each other, which not all of my clients do. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can meet you for coffee tomorrow or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I like her. I like her. I want to be part of her sisterhood. But talk to me about like where you were when we started working together. Talk to me about
Mhm.
your fundraising background and just the opportunity maybe that was in front of you.
I have zero fundraising background. I have zero nonprofit background. My mother actually said to me recently, I had no idea that you knew how to do any of this. And I said, I don't. I'm just making it up.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. It was more like a parental, like, wow, like what, I
Good. It was
didn't know
she was
you
in
could do
awe.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're very good
I
at
was
it.
like, well,
So
I
take
don't,
that.
I think I know when to find other people who do know how to do these
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
to teach me and to mentor me. And that's been a huge part of the joy in this process. So, we started off the organization with all corporate funding because that's what I knew. That was the space that I had been in. And that was also the space that our board is in.
Yes.
And it very quickly became clear that we needed to diversify our funding pool. I still remember doing outreach, just random outreach to people. I very clearly also want to give credit to Patty Fong at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. She's no longer there, but she was one of these people who just took my call
Oh,
and didn't know me at all and just walked me through like, here's what the philanthropy landscape is like. And here are some people who you should talk to. And it was amazing just to see the openness
yes.
that people had, the willingness to support me on that learning journey. And by the time that I had reached out to you, Sherry, we were several years into the organization. We had received grant funding, but I felt dissatisfied with a lot of the traditional forms of fundraising that I was hearing about. I was dissatisfied with the idea of a give and get policy for the
Mm-hmm.
board because I found it to be exclusionary as to who could be on the board. I didn't really understand the value of running events because I think that you spend so much time. Events are so hard. And it might still happen. We got a great event last
Yes.
week, but smaller. And mailers, kind of all of these things that I had been kind of reading about and learning about just didn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
And the part of fundraising that I really love is the relationship building. And there's another ED, Mandy Moody, who has been on this podcast.
Yes, she
And
has.
I am in an executive directors group with her. And she was like, this woman has changed my life. And
Who's
I
that?
said, well, I want that.
I love it. She's an awesome
And it really
fundraiser
was
as
this,
well.
yes. And it really was this moment of just really looking for a new perspective and a mentor and a coach because I had gotten my feet wet, but I really knew that I needed another kind of step up.
Yeah. And you're both busy leaders. You're both killing it. And like, oftentimes it's like, we don't have time to do the old traditional spin cycle, appeals, events, fundraising. You're growing too fast to do that. Almost, you guys have that similarity in that case. So, Eve, maybe talk to me about perhaps what particular aspects of our work maybe have made the biggest difference for you now that we're almost a year into it. What do you look back and say like, oh, that was a game changer?
There are so many different things. I think the overarching message, though, that has been the game changer is breaking down this idea that fundraising is asking people for money.
Mm.
And really, fundraising is about relationship development. And that message is something I've then been able to convey to our board members, to our team members, because I think it makes everybody squirmish to ask people for money.
Totally.
And you've given me a reframe, which is that it's really dating. You're trying to find people who are mission aligned, who happen to have the funds, and I happen to have this amazing team. And together we can take the resources that each of us has to further this mission. And they can't reach their mission without my team, and I can't reach our mission without their funding. And that kind of perspective of fundraising as relationship building, I think, for me, gave me a different perspective even on my own role as executive director. And I think it's just been a reframe that's been really necessary for the team.
Yeah. And could you lay on top of that you guys do a lot of project-based funding, and so to then pivot into, I think, greater amounts of general operating revenue or the need to pivot into that. Could you talk to me about how you've A, balanced that, but B, just shifts that you've made to attract more of those general operating gifts?
Yes. And that was also one of the, main desires also when we were introduced as, I was reading through your website and doing kind of the online stalking and saw the emphasis on general operation funding. And I just, again, like, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't even know that I could be focused on that. Mm. I just thought, okay, I always need to build in whatever 15% of each of my restricted grants in order to cover Gen Ops. And, I was trying to figure out, well, how the heck does that actually work? And then you introduced me to this idea, no, people might just give to the organization. And I think that there are many kind of tangible outputs that have allowed us to shift this narrative. So number one is the deck that you've helped us create, like what we are calling the conversation starter deck.
Yeah.
And I also, by the way, had a funder tell me yesterday that is the best deck she has ever seen of any organization.
Love it. Love it.
And I've seen versions of it from some of your other clients. I don't know that it is the best deck ever compared to some of the other ones I've seen of your clients, but I am really proud of it. And I think it's really the storytelling. Yeah. It's the framing that is putting this kind of in a larger context. And also, you moved me away from just talking to a funder about one project. I had been going into every conversation thinking, okay, which project is going to resonate with them? What are they going to care about? And instead, I start every conversation about the organization and what are we doing overall? And then if they say, we only, fund projects, okay, fine. Let's find the one that fits, what your own mission. But even just starting the conversation from that higher level of this is the grand problem that we are facing as humanity. And here are the multifaceted ways that Food for Climate League is working to address those issues. And then also allowing the time and the space to even look through the funding and present the story of, general operations is actually amplifying each of these projects. Yeah. And the more this organization grows, the more I'm seeing the necessity for those Gen Ops funds and, the executive director, the operations team, the communications team, your bookkeeper, all of these things are also the infrastructure for allowing those project-based teams to be successful. It's removing the day-to-day stress that they might be feeling without those structures in place. And you honestly just gave me the framing and the language to be able to tell that story to funders. And that also was with you gave me a budget document, a 990 structured budget document that put that also into focus in terms of the actual numbers of here's where the money is being spent. And then how is this divided out across the organization? But it was just one more way for me to really visualize and see, right, every dollar that comes in has to be going to not this one project, but then also all of our software and our conference travel budget. And it's, it's really changed the way that I frame our work and what people need to invest in.
I love it. I think you were already a great storyteller. I think that's why the work is fun for me. And then to move into that investment level story of why you need it. What is the overarching mission? What are the plans? How can they invest in this annually? You have big growth plans, which, I love a 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x. Talking about how donors are responding to maybe casting a longer vision and getting them really excited about what this looks like to be a stakeholder in your organization long term.
So some of the response that we've now seen, now that people are coming to us saying, what would you do with $1 million? What would you do with $1 million over 3 years? People really appreciate that we have a plan.
Yeah.
And I actually received this feedback yesterday from a funder. And she was very frank about, it's surprising that some larger organizations don't have a set plan of what they want to do with the money. But I think that now we've been able to prove that there's a need for the service that we provide. And we've also been able to show that if we can grow our team, we can expand the impact of each of our projects. And so I think that we've been able to showcase that we know what we're doing and that there is space within this ecosystem for what we're offering and that no one else is doing it. So, it is a little, it's the business positioning of it. But it's just having a plan in place too, of saying with confidence, this is the direction that we're going in. And that was something that you forced us to do. And I think before it had made me really squeamish to say in 2030, this is who we're going to be. But I think having that goal, whether that's exactly what we turn into or not, having that North Star is also giving our team something to rally around so that they understand when we're bringing on new team members or bringing on new projects that this is the direction that we're going in. I think it gives them a bigger vision of what it is we aim to achieve. But it's the same thing for these funding organizations. And I think it's confidence building just for them, just to know that we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Who do we want to be? What impact do we want to have? What are our own internal goals?
Yeah, they see that confidence. I mean, you're a great storyteller. You're already confident, but then to sit at the table and say, "Can I walk you through our growth plans? Can I walk you through what we believe that's going to look like?" And rarely do I see people doing that, and funders love that. They respond to it. And Eve, what would you say is the biggest kind of? You talked about a few of them, but maybe the biggest tangible outcome of our work together.
Yeah, so I've touched on a few of it, but I think it is the conversation starter deck. It's also the gift chart. So just a tool for saying, and this actually last week I had a conversation with someone, and he's someone who has supported our organization since the very beginning. And he said, "Do you still need my money?"
Yeah.
and have you gotten so big and so successful? I said, "Of course I need your money." And I said, our top 30 donors are 10K and up. And that framing to him, he's excited to be a top 30 donor. And he said, I can do that.
Textbook, Eve, textbook.
And I wouldn't have had that language unless I had the gift chart. And it's also just a great visual for engaging the board. I can put people's names in there to say, this is the box that you're responsible for and how is that going? It's an accountability metric. And tactic. But it's also a way to show, here's our progress. Look at all the boxes that we've turned blue at this point in the year. And, pat yourselves on the back. And the response that I have gotten from people who I do show it to, especially on the board, is almost like, this kind of amorphous idea of, a dollar amount we need to raise. Now it feels tangible. It feels actionable. And it feels less overwhelming because I'm not responsible for the entire pie. I'm responsible for that box.
Yes.
And, I think that that's been an incredibly useful tool because if you look at the giant picture, oftentimes it's immobilizing. You are just paralyzed by the idea of, oh my God, I need to do all of this. But if you're able to say, no, you're responsible for these 2 boxes and let's put someone's name in there and let's walk through it together. And I'll check in with you and I'll give you the email outreach language and you just need to make the introduction. And again, going back to the framing of, and you're not asking that person for money. You're just trying to see, is this someone we should date?
Yes. First date.
Yes, exactly. And then you see where it goes. And sometimes it's not right. And sometimes it's perfect.
Right. One of my clients calls herself, well, she is the CEO, but she says it stands for Chief Email Officer because she feels
Yeah.
like she's always emailing funders, bumping the email, all the things. I feel
Yeah.
like you're right up there as the CEO, Chief Email Officer as well. And
Yeah.
I think at one point you were kind of equating the influence as you've on a donor of like, hey, what do we want them to do as a result of this email? And you had tied it
Hmm.
back to almost your work of like, oh, this is actually kind of like, I don't know if you said behavioral psychology but talk to me a little bit about maybe how your reach out and your follow up and what you're asking for, even in the email cadence, has changed.
Yeah, so this has been a big shift for us. And I think it is going back to this relationship development of how are you then tracking your interactions with every single person and making sure that A, you're checking in on a regular basis, but B, you're showing someone what you're doing with their work. I actually had another conversation with a donor over the weekend and they said,
Mm.
"Well, it's really great to see what you're building and what you're doing." And the only reason they knew that is because I had sent them a 90-day post grant or post donation email recap.
Good.
And, in this particular situation, I wasn't able to say, your $1,000 went specifically to this project. It was Gen Ops. And so I was saying, this is how the organization overall is growing. And I think I've become just more comfortable saying, and this is so needed. People like you are so
Yeah.
needed. And I'm hoping that these are individuals who will continue to give every year. And I think that's kind of the part of the relationship building that I now need to work on, of getting
Yeah.
people to give for the first time, maybe the second time, but I think kind of developing that more ongoing relationship and giving relationship is going to be really important. But the email cadence, translates into a phone call cadence.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting to know people. And that's the part
Yeah.
of the job that I really love. And
Right.
then it really doesn't feel like you're asking people for money. It just
Yep.
feels like you're working on this collective mission and let's figure out a way to work together. Because if you're already on call 2 or 3, especially, you know that your values align
Yes.
because you've sussed that out in the first call.
Yeah. And the thing is, you're offering people an amazing opportunity to give to the work. I mean, it's mindset where, it's all the things. It's being confident that you have the plans and you have the tools and you believe that your mission is worthy of people investing in, and it is, whether it's Gen Ops or project-based giving. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
I also feel more confident in that now that we're 4 or 5 years in. We
Right.
have the case studies. We know what we're doing. I have the impact metrics. So I think that's also
Yeah.
making a big difference.
Yeah. Can you share just like one example of a project because I just feel like the work is so interesting, whether you can say names or not, of like, yeah, we did this for this amazing company and they were studying this specific thing and we helped them see this. Could you actually give a tangible example?
So we had this amazing opportunity presented to us by Google several years ago. And they came to us with an issue that I think is many different organizations are facing at this point, which is that they looked at their scope 3 emissions and found that a large percentage of it was coming from the cafeteria.
Hmm.
So for listeners who don't know, 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions come from food and agriculture. That's on a global scale, but
Wow.
oftentimes when businesses look at their own ecosystem, that same 1/3 number shows up in their own numbers. And that comes from food waste. It also comes from meat consumption. Mainly, those are the two things. So it's animal proteins and waste.
Yes.
And it has a much larger impact than many organizations are initially aware of. And there's a lot of companies right now that are saying, hey, A, we want to reduce our scope 3 emissions. B, a plant forward diet is also just better for us.
Yep.
And if you want to have a healthy workplace, then you want to have people who are eating more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, etc., and some animal proteins. But Google was facing a very interesting challenge, which is that they had given this directive to their culinary team to cook plant forward options. And the narrative they found within the culinary team's mind is plants are not tasty, not filling, not what people want. Now, how did that narrative come to be? Well, first of all, culinarians, if you go to culinary school, you train up to the meat station. So meat is a symbol of success. And you are told that narrative also by society.
Right.
Meat is something special, celebratory. And so when there was a directive from the top down to cook something other, there was a lot of pushback.
Wow.
And the most interesting thing about food, I think, is that, if someone doesn't love what they're serving, you can taste it.
Yes.
You can feel it.
Totally.
Even when you have the individual serving you the food, there is so much energy and body language that is communicating whether they're excited to give this to you. Like, why do you get into food service in the first place? It's to bring moments of joy. It's to serve people. So think about the ramifications if you're then asking that individual to serve something that they're not excited about and they don't think you're going to be excited about it. And so that narrative needed to change. And Google gave us this amazing opportunity to start to look at how do you change the hearts and minds of culinarians to be more intrinsically motivated to cook plant-forward foods. And this was a 3-year project. We actually didn't even know at the beginning, who in the ecosystem did we need to focus on to create this change. It came down to the hourly line level workers.
Wow.
Which is also a story of inclusivity, right?
Yes.
Just because you have an executive making this decision, it's not going to happen unless you're engaging your hourly line level workers, because they are the true power holders. They are the change makers, and they're the taste makers, right? They're the people, if someone comes in and says, what's good today? What should I have?
Yes.
And we were able to develop a program that flips the narrative of plant forward cooking. And the way that we were able to do this is by interviewing these workers, getting to know them as individuals, asking them, why'd you get into this in the first place? What are you laying awake at night worried about? What's your hesitation around cooking this way? So we were able to, through those interactions, understand kind of what the baseline narrative is, and what what I would say is the biased narrative, the negative narrative of plant-forward cooking. And then we were able to present it differently. And we have a workshop now that's being run around the world. Over 450 culinarians have gone through the program, and we are able to show through this program that nearly 90% of people in this 90-minute intervention are more personally identifying with plant-forward cooking afterwards. So there's a strong change in perception of there's, me and there's plant-forward cooking over here. And then after, it's me and plant-forward cooking are overlapping. Wow. And then there's also a behavior metric for this particular program, which was trying to inspire these individuals to sign up for a 6-month culinary skill training called Plant Forward Kitchen through the CIA, which is actually welcome and open to anybody if you're interested. Cool. But we now have, oh God, I need to think about what the number is. It's again close to 90% of people through this 90 minutes are signing up for PFK. Wow. So 90 minutes of a new story, and suddenly people are like, okay, I'll spend 6 months on this training.
Wow.
And we've had the first cohort of 90 people complete the 6 months. And it's amazing to see that simply shifting the story can make a big difference. And I'll briefly just frame what the story is that we tell so that it's a little bit more tangible for folks. We talk about that plant forward is cool, that this is a way for you to create job security, because we heard from people that was something that they were concerned about. The what's in it for me? Well, this is what the top restaurants are doing. If you're getting this degree, if you're getting, this knowledge, it's going to set you up for success. It's about a sense of control and safety, personal control and safety. Then we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we highlight the fact that African Americans are actually 3 times more likely to eat a plant-based diet than white Americans.
Wow.
And that's breaking down this idea that we had heard from people of plant-forward cooking, to be frank, being associated with white culture. And most of the hourly line level cooks that in this particular environment are people of color.
Yes.
And so it was just giving people the space and time to think about, what food did you grow up eating? What did your grandparents grow up eating? A traditional Asian, Latino, African diet, it's all plant forward.
Yes.
And so it's also just about giving people the time and space to just think about it, talk about it with their colleagues.
Process it.
And then exactly. And then the last part, yes, it's about the environment, but what we focus on in the US is biodiversity. So thinking about the limited number of ingredients we actually use on a day-to-day basis, There's 400,000 edible plant species in the world.
Wow.
75% of the diet only uses 11 of them.
Wow. 11?
Yes. 11 plant species and 3 animal species comprise
Wow.
75% of human calories consumed. And there's 400,000 edible plant species. So like from a creativity standpoint,
Right.
it was like, this is boring. So,
I mean,
and that's,
the options
and
are
that was
endless.
again,
I mean, that's wild.
options are endless. So anyway, this is kind of an example of you get to know people. You get to figure out what makes them tick. For this, it was job security, it was inclusivity, it was creativity. And we figured out a way to frame Plant Forward within those structures so that it was just more relatable on a day-to-day basis for people.
That's exactly what you've done with fundraising. You know, it's literally the description is the same. This is why you're such a great fundraiser and relationship builder. I love it.
Yeah. And I think it's also, Sherry, I think like the next kind of phase for us, and I'll tell you the project that is within the food space in general, is trying to also figure out how do you speak the language of climate investors. And that's not something I know very well yet because I need to get to know more people in the climate space.
Yes.
You got to do that need finding. You got to figure out what makes them tick. And then how do you reframe your offering to meet people where they are instead of, hitting people over the head with statistics about the impact of the food system. It's just not the way to get people to act.
Yeah, it feels so big. So to really boil it down to what we would act on is critical. Eve, thanks for schooling me per usual. I feel like I'm like on the edge of my seat listening to that story. Tell people how they can find you. I'm happy to put your books in the show notes, all the things, but tell people where they can find you.
So you can learn about Food for Climate League at foodforclimateleague.org, and the 4 is FOR. We are thinking about shortening that URL, but have not yet. And speaking of funding models, originally we were going to be a membership model, which is why we have league in our name. So, you pivot. Every organization is a prototype, and we're constantly iterating. But the name has stuck. So it's foodforclimateleague.org. If you want to learn any more about me personally, it's Turow-Paul.com. And I think that's it. I think that's the easiest way to find us. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. That's really where we post the most.
Eve, thanks so much for being on my podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sherry.